Welcome to World History. After our journey across Asia last unit, we're going to be looking this unit at the growth of the Atlantic world. And so we're going to take a trip around the Atlantic and look at the various people who were there and talk about how they made their livings and what they were up to. So we're going to start our story in West Africa, which is something that you probably should have covered in world history in 6th grade, but it was a long time ago, so we're going to do a quick refresher here. So by the end of this lesson, you need to understand the role that geography played in the development of sub-Saharan African cultures, compare and contrast the accomplishments of our three empires, Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, and explain the reasons that these empires declined in the 14 and 1500s. So let's jump into our story. We're going to start by talking briefly about the geography of Africa. Africa is an incredibly big and incredibly diverse place, and it's important to note that the culture of North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa are completely different. When we say Sub-Saharan, we mean south of the Sahara, which is this massive desert that covers a lot of the top of the continent there. So it's important to note Northern Africa had always been integrated into the world that we've sort of already talked about in the Mediterranean, with Greece and Rome and the Muslim world and Egypt and all this stuff. But Sub-Saharan Africa is a very different place. As you can see in this map, Sub-Saharan Africa is incredibly rich in resources. But because of the desert, it's incredibly difficult to get those resources out. So what ended up happening is Sub-Saharan Africa was connected to the rest of the world through a series of caravan trade routes across this massive desert. And through these trade routes, both the merchants who traveled along them got rich, but we also saw the rise of powerful African kingdoms who made incredible amounts of money selling these resources to the caravan traders. The first important empire is the Empire of Ghana. We can see it here with its capital of Kumbi-Sele. It connected across the Sahara Desert with these trade routes and became incredibly rich selling natural resources across the desert, as we already talked about. As you can see here, they had some very unique architectural techniques using some of the supplies that they had at hand. And you can see pictured here a caravan trade route that would be bringing supplies in or out of these empires. One of the most important things that happened during the reign of the Empire of Ghana is Islam came to sub-Saharan Africa. Islam, as we remember, of course, is an Abrahamic religion that originated in the Middle East and came to dominate the southern Mediterranean after the year 600. These Muslim merchants brought Islam across the Sahara Desert, and the emperors of Ghana eventually converted in order to have closer relations with the traders who brought them so much wealth. And so what we see from Ghana is Africans bring in technology from the outside world, which significantly increases the complexity of their society. The Empire of Ghana was eventually replaced by the Empire of Mali, which extended both all the way out to the Atlantic Ocean and also in to create the famous trading city, Timbuktu. The Malian kings also got incredibly rich through this trade. They built elaborate cities, as we can see here. And the Empire of Mali was home to possibly the richest man to have ever lived, who you've probably heard of before. Mansa Musa was an incredibly rich emperor of Mali. He's noteworthy because he became famous in world history because, as a devout Muslim, he wanted to make his pilgrimage to Mecca at least once in his life. And so we have some record of his journey, of his Hajj, and he's famous because he brought so much gold to give away on his journey that when he got to the city of Alexandria in northern Egypt, he actually ended up totally destroying their economy by spending so much money that the value of gold became almost worthless. And so Mansa Musa, by spreading around so much money, he really got outsiders interested in Africa because they were wondering, hey, who is this guy? How does he have so much money? And of course, how can we show up and get some of this money? The final sub-Saharan African trading empire is the Empire of Songhai. They controlled the trading routes across sub-Saharan Africa, again, around this important city of Timbuktu. Sunni Ali, the founder of the Songhai Emperor, initiated important military reforms including incorporating gunpowder weapons into his army. He also increased his control over local tribes, giving himself more power, and he significantly expanded the sea trade of the Songhai Empire. The Songhai Empire declined for a variety of different reasons. One of the reasons was that northern African states began attacking southward and putting pressure on the Songhai Empire, and the Portuguese started moving in and taking land along the coast. We'll spend more time talking about the Portuguese next time, but it's important to note that the Portuguese were trying to get around Africa in order to tap into Asian trade routes, and so they started taking and building settlements along the coast of Africa in their attempt to, again, get to the Indian Ocean and bypass the Ottoman Empire, which had previously controlled this trade. So all of this weakened the Songhai Empire until they eventually collapsed and lost most of their territory. From this time onward, no one power controlled these valuable areas. Instead, local tribes started controlling their local resources, and although some of them made some money, this is the end of the great African empires. So that brings us back to our objectives. Make sure you can provide somewhat detailed answers to these questions. And when we come back, we'll start talking about the European exploration, what they were after, and how they fit into this whole picture.